Everyone, we have author Mwalim here, and he's going to tell us a little bit about himself.
A little bit about myself.
Yes,
A little
sir.
bit, or a lot, or a whole lot, or
Just a little bit.
medium. Just a little bit. Well, okay, everybody. Hello, my name is Mwalim. I'm a storyteller by background and training. My primary work as a writer has been in playwriting. I should also explain that my first art form is actually as a musician. I'm about, let's see, how old am I now? As I was saying, primarily as a musician, and writing was sort of a side hobby, and then they kind of fell next to each other. I grew up in the Bronx, went to music and art high school, and then my father's side of the family is in Massachusetts, the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, to be precise. If you're wondering who the Wampanoags are, we're the ones who met the Pilgrims. Sorry, who knew? But we should have been out there with like harpoons and whatnot when we saw the boat. But hindsight is 2020.
Right.
But away from that, I went to Boston University. I was a music major undergrad, and then I did my master's in film production. So sort of the full trip around.
Okay. Now, how many books have you wrote?
I've written 2 books. The first one was a collection of short stories called A Mixed Medicine Bag. And then Land of the Black Squirrels, which is my latest book, is my first novel. And that came out back in February, just in time for the pandemic shutdown. So I guess you could say a slight victim of bad timing, but nonetheless, been having some success in moving the book. And Land of the Black Squirrels is a novel, and it's a novel about growing up as a musician in the Northeast Bronx. I guess you could say on one layer, in terms of the allegory side, because I did say I'm a storyteller, so I believe heavily in allegory, but the allegory is basically the relationship between jazz and hip hop.
Okay.
Looking at it generationally. And it's a story about mentors. It's a story about friends. It's a story about coming of age. It's got love stories in it. It's a bunch of stories. It's an interrelated story about just a community of people who grew up in a section of the Bronx called the Valley, which is the Northeast Bronx. And yeah, I call it a long form hip hop jazz folktale. And it's actually book 1 of a proposed series. I'm working on book 2 now. The name of the series is called The Bronx Boheme. Yeah, this is book 1.
And what inspired you to write this book?
Growing up, I guess you could say. Growing up, and also looking at, I was very blessed growing up to have mentors and role models who were musicians and artists and helped shape the path that I ended up. Some people who were experienced in music, experienced in theater, experienced in various forms of the art, experienced in community development. Those were my mentors. And then finding myself in a situation where then all of a sudden I have young people who are coming to me about, well, how do I do this? And how can I do that? And also then becoming an educator. I sort of fell into teaching because of that. Honestly, people are like, how'd you become a teacher? I'm like, how to become a teacher? Easy. I needed a job. I knew how to do it. But it turned out to be a job that I discovered I loved.
Okay.
And I've been teaching now for about a little better than 30 years.
Wow.
And again, completely love that side of it. I've taught public school, I've taught in community programs. For the last 17 years, I've been a professor of English and Black Studies at UMass Dartmouth. And even during my career in New York as a playwright and a musician. In fact, I'm probably the only New York musician who had theater as a day job. But a lot of that was also teaching for the Bronx Writers Center, working with the Lincoln Center Directors Lab, the American Indian Community House down in the village. So it's been a mix of all those things, but a lot of those experiences sort of like come to the surface in the novel.
Okay.
And some of it is even just memories of like New York City in the 1980s and the 1990s and before gentrification and before the rebuild and before you look at things and say, I remember when that used to be there.
Yeah. So Land of the Squirrels, how long did it take you to finish writing it?
It started out as an oral tradition type of piece. And the original element of it was, I guess, about maybe 10 minutes long. First time I told it was in 1993 in Cambridge, Massachusetts, at a storytellers gathering. And then as the story started to grow and build, I told it 2003 at the Nuyorican Poets Cafe in New York. And by then, the story was about 45 minutes long. And kind of cool to be able to tell a 45-minute long story and not have the audience boo you or anything, but like, wait, what happened next? And, so that was what happened. And just trying to figure out how to flesh the story out. At one point, I tried to do it as a screenplay and realized, especially this is before you had Netflix, so things had to be only like about 90 minutes to 2 hours long. And now you can make it, you can make a series, so it's easier to translate a novel. But I decided to then just write it as a novel, but as a novel that reflects speech. So it's written in the spoken word form, it's written as a text that somebody could read out loud. And that sort of conversational flow, at least that's what I went for with it.
Okay. And do you have the book with you?
Oh, yes, I do.
Can you hold it up for us to see?
I just happen to have a copy right here.
Oh, squirrels playing sax? That's a sax, right? Get me to mess up my instruments. Okay. And what made you choose that cover? And the title.
Well, Land of the Black Squirrels. If you've ever been to the Bronx, you know that since the late 60s, our squirrels are mostly black, the fur. To some extent, I think the I think to some extent the squirrels chase the gray squirrels out of town. And it's also kind of funny because noticing that black squirrels and I should say the arrival of black squirrels sort of like mirrored white flight from the Bronx.
Okay.
Because around the same time the black squirrels start to show up is when you start to find that all of your white neighbors are like moving to Florida and Long Island and that kind of thing. So it's like, wow, white flight hit us so hard in the Bronx that even the squirrels turned black. All right, well, there you go. So, but that's why it's called Land of the Black Squirrels. And it's funny because when people from New York, and particularly like the Bronx and Westchester, see the title, the first thing they think of is, oh, wow, he wrote about where I'm from, and I guess the cover just came to me because of black squirrels, and I guess because it's about musicians, it was just sort of like, why not give the black squirrel a saxophone? And of course, again, repping the North Bronx, as you can see, the wall that he's standing on is Baychester Ave. I guess that was what caused the artwork to resonate with me. My cousin Robert actually drew that for me.
Nice. And where can we purchase the book?
Land of the Black Squirrels, you can buy it at Barnes and Noble, not at, but from Barnes and Noble, I should say, or buy it from Amazon, your usual suspects. You can get a signed copy directly from the publisher, which is 30-3 pages.com/Bronx Boheme. And if you order it directly from the publisher, you get a signed copy. We started doing that after the book tour got shut down for the pandemic.
Okay.
But otherwise, the ebook and the physical book.
Okay. And what do you hope readers take away from reading your book?
A good story. I mean, that's the number one thing. A good story, but also Just sort of a sense of the characters, the interactions. I hope sometimes readers read it, and especially creative types, if they read it, I hope they find themselves in the story.
Mm.
Because we, tried to cover a little bit of everybody and everybody's dreams, but just sort of also a certain level, I guess, of nostalgia. Because as I said, a lot of the book takes place in New York City before the year 2000, and it's a lot of the points of the city that no longer exist.
Okay.
And it's an interesting thing. I didn't intend for this to be a series originally, but when I got to about page 300 and realized I still had more to tell, I was like, yeah, that's why you write another book and call it a series.
And that's
So,
coming out when?
not exactly sure.
Okay.
It's this is gonna sound wild, but after a while, when I started writing this and fleshing it out, it almost became a matter of the characters were telling me the story, and I was just writing down what they were saying.
Okay.
So there's the second book, and then there's also a novella because one of the characters like whispered in my ear, "Yo, I got a story that you haven't told yet that needs to be out there." So there's a little bit of a side story that's also coming out as well as the next novel.
Well, congratulations on everything.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And how do you think being a writer has helped you as a person?
Um, it's kind of funny with this, and it was something I didn't find out actually till my senior year of college. I'm dyslexic,
Okay.
and always knew I was a very slow reader. And in fact, I had a wonderful teacher in second grade, who's now Dr. Michael Shaw, but was back in those days Mr. Shaw. And he taught me to read because I came into second grade not really knowing how to read. He taught me how to read by teaching me how to write.
Mm.
He said, if you can tell a story, write it down. Great, you wrote the story down. Okay, good. Now you can read somebody else's and help build up my receptive vocabulary, as it were.
Okay.
So that was, I would say, my introduction to writing and reading. And then when I was in high school, although I was there as a music major, I started winning writing competitions first in the school and then citywide for fiction, creative nonfiction, and that type of thing. It was also around that time I became part of a invisible street theater group. If you're wondering what invisible street theater is, it's when you stage a play out in the middle of the street and the audience doesn't realize they're an audience.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. And this is New York, right?
Oh, yeah. In the 1980s.
Okay.
Where crazy stuff happened anyway.
Right. Okay. Is there anything else that you would like to tell us about Land of the Black Squirrels?
I can say some of my most influential writers, or the writers who influenced me most deeply, would be people like John Oliver Killen, Toni Morrison, Ralph Ellison, and to an extent as well, like Amiri Baraka.
Okay.
And so I guess with Land of the Black Squirrels, you kind of find the influences of their voices in my work as well.
All right, everyone. That was author Mwalim telling us about his book, The Black Squirrels. Make sure you like and subscribe below.